The warning lights screamed red across every surface of the cockpit, while Sergeant Marcus Webb fought with controls that no longer responded to his commands. His patrol ship was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Mayday! Mayday!" Marcus transmitted over every channel he could access. "This is Colonial Marine Vessel Steadfast experiencing catastrophic engine failure. I'm going down." Static answered him. Nothing but static and the horrible groaning of metal tearing itself apart around him. The planet below filled his view screen. A world colored in deep purples and blacks with swirling green clouds that looked toxic even from orbit. Designation ZK447, according to his emergency database. One of the Galactic Council's quarantine worlds, where nobody was supposed to ever set foot. Marcus had been a Marine for 8 years, had survived 3 combat deployments and countless dangerous situations, but he had never felt fear quite like this, the fear of dying alone on a world where even his bones would never be found. The ship hit the atmosphere and began to shake so violently that Marcus's vision blurred. Heat shields that were already damaged started to fail, and the temperature in the cockpit climbed rapidly. He could smell something burning, could see smoke beginning to fill the small space. Come on, come on," he muttered through gritted teeth while pulling the manual release for the emergency landing thrusters. They sputtered, coughed, then finally roared to life with barely enough power to make a difference. The purple jungle rushed up to meet him at a speed that would have been beautiful if it wasn't about to kill him. Marcus crossed his arms over his chest and tucked his head down in the crash position they had drilled into him during training. The position that was supposed to keep you alive, even though everyone knew it probably wouldn't impact. World became noise and pain and chaos. Metal shrieked and tore while Marcus was thrown against his restraints hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. The ship plowed through what felt like kilometers of vegetation before finally, mercifully, coming to a stop that left everything eerily quiet except for the creaking of cooling metal and Marcus's own ragged breathing. He hung upside down in his seat for a moment, trying to remember how his body was supposed to work, trying to make sense of the fact that he was still alive. Blood dripped from his nose, and he tasted copper, but nothing felt broken. Nothing hurt in the way that meant serious injury. The release catch for his restraints took 3 tries before his shaking fingers managed it. He fell hard onto what had been the ceiling, rolled, and lay there gasping while his heart tried to remember its normal rhythm. "Okay," Marcus said to the empty ship, to himself, to nobody. "Okay, you're alive now, stay that way." His emergency kit had torn free during the crash, but he found it wedged under a collapsed panel. Inside was everything the Colonial Marines thought you might need to survive for 2 weeks on a hostile world. Water purification tablets, high-calorie ration bars, a basic med kit, a survival knife, a fire starter, and most importantly, his service pistol with 3 spare magazines. Not much to face a quarantine world with, but it would have to be enough. Marcus pulled himself through the torn hull and out into alien air. His suit's atmospheric scanner immediately started beeping warnings at him. Toxic spores in the air. Breathable oxygen, but only barely. Gravity reading at 1.4 times Earth standard, which explained why his legs felt like they were made of lead. He activated the air filter on his helmet and took his first real breath of ZK447. The jungle around him was like nothing he had ever seen. Trees that looked more like crystal towers than wood rows, hundreds of meters into a sky that shimmered with colors that hurt to look at directly. The vegetation wasn't green, but purple and black, and deep red. All of it moving slightly, even though there was no wind, moving like it was breathing. Marcus checked his emergency beacon smashed, beyond repair in the crash, then his long-range transmitter also destroyed, which meant nobody was coming to help him. Nobody even knew where he was. 2 weeks, he told himself while shouldering his pack. Survive for 2 weeks, and maybe you can jury-rig something from the ship's comm system. 2 weeks. He made camp that first night in the partial shelter of the crashed ship. eating a ration bar that tasted like cardboard and fear while he listened to the sounds of the jungle around him. Sounds like nothing on Earth. Screams and roars and clicking noises that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The database. Entry for ZK-447 that he pulled up on his wrist-mounted display made for cheerful reading. Extreme hazard classification, apex predator species designated. Ralith have killed all survey teams. Recommend complete avoidance quarantine status. Permanent. There were grainy images of the Ralith in the file, and Marcus stared at them with growing dread. Creatures that stood twice as tall as a man on 4 massive legs, with 2 more limbs that looked designed for nothing but killing. Bodies covered in what appeared to be crystalline armor that grew from their flesh. Heads that were all teeth and hunger. The file noted that Ralith hunted in packs, showed problem-solving intelligence, and had never once failed to kill every living thing they encountered. Well, Marcus said to the darkness outside his broken ship, at least I know what's going to eat me. He didn't sleep that first night. Every sound made him reach for his pistol. Every shadow looked like death coming for him on 6 legs when the purple-black sun finally rose over the alien jungle. Marcus was exhausted but alive, and that would have to count as a victory. Spent the second day trying to salvage what he could from the ship and exploring the immediate area. He found water in a stream that ran strange colors, but that his purification tablets said was safe to drink after treatment. He found what might have been fruit on some of the crystal trees, but didn't trust it enough to try eating it that night. He slept a little, his pistol in his hand and his dreams full of crystalline monsters. On the third day, Marcus found tracks. They were huge, pressed deep into the soft purple moss that covered everything. Each print showed 4 clawed toes and measured nearly as long as his arm. Ralith tracks, fresh ones, and they led in a rough circle around his crash site. Something had been watching him, studying him, and Marcus knew with cold certainty that his time had just run out. He heard it before he saw it, a sound like wind chimes mixed with a growl. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. Marcus turned slowly with his pistol raised, and there it was. The Ralith stood at the edge of the clearing, smaller than the ones in the database images, but still massive, still covered in crystalline armor. That caught the alien sunlight and scattered it in rainbow patterns. It was magnificent and deadly, and absolutely perfect. This was how he was going to die. But the creature didn't charge. It took 1 step forward, then another, moving carefully, like it was approaching something dangerous. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger, while every instinct screamed at him to shoot first, to not wait, to go down fighting. The Ralith made that wind chime sound again, softer this time, almost questioning. Then it did something that stopped Marcus's heart. It sat down. Massive predator that was supposed to rip him apart simply sat down like an earth dog might, and then it made a sound that Marcus had never expected to hear from a creature that lived on a quarantine world. It whimpered. Marcus lowered his pistol slightly, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. The Ralith was young, he realized, probably juvenile based on its size, and as it shifted he saw why it had approached instead of attacked. There was a wound on its shoulder, deep and ragged, cutting through the crystal armor and into the flesh beneath, already showing signs of infection. The creature looked at him with eyes that were far too intelligent, far too aware, and made that questioning wind chime sound again. "You've got to be kidding me." Marcus whispered. The Ralith took another careful step forward, and then another, until it was close enough that Marcus could have reached out and touched it. Close enough that it could have killed him with a single swipe of those crystal-edged claws. Instead, the massive predator lowered its head and very gently pressed its face against Marcus's chest, against every bit of logic, against all his training, against the entire weight of the Galactic Council's warnings about this world Marcus Webb made. A choice. He holstered his pistol and reached up to touch the creature's crystalline face. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, let's see if I can help you." Marcus worked on the Vralith's wound while talking in a low, steady voice, the way his grandfather had taught him to calm spooked horses back on Earth. It didn't matter what you said. Grandpa had told him only that you kept your voice calm and your movements slow and predictable. Easy there, big guy, Marcus murmured while cleaning the infected gash with his limited medical supplies. I know it hurts, but we need to get this cleaned out or it's going to get worse. That's it. Just stay still. The creature, he had started thinking of it as Shard because of the way its crystalline armor caught the light, made small whimpering sounds, but didn't pull away. Didn't attack, just trembled slightly under his hands, like it understood he was trying to help. The wound was bad, clearly made by another Vralith's claws during some kind of fight. And Marcus used half his antibiotic supplies getting it clean and bandaged. He had no idea if human medicine would even work on alien biology, but doing nothing seemed worse when he finished. Shard made that wind chime sound that Marcus was beginning to recognize as contentment, and pressed closer against him. The weight of the creature should have been terrifying, but instead Marcus found it oddly comforting, like having a very large and very dangerous dog decide you were worth protecting. You're welcome, Marcus said while scratching behind what he thought might be Shard's ears. The creature leaned into the touch, and Marcus couldn't help but smile despite everything. Despite being stranded on a death world with a supposedly lethal predator cuddled against his chest like a lost puppy, Shard refused to leave after that. Marcus tried to shoo the creature away that first night, worried that its pack might come looking and decide he was a threat. But Shard simply settled down at the entrance to his shelter and refused to budge. Every time Marcus tried to move past, the Vralith would gently herd him back inside with its massive body. You're kidnapping me, Marcus complained. But he was talking to a six-legged alien predator, so complaining didn't accomplish much over the next few days. An unlikely partnership formed. Shard would disappear into the jungle each morning and return hours later dragging creatures that made Marcus's skin crawl, things with too many legs and teeth in places where teeth shouldn't be. But the Vralith would eat its fill and then carefully bring Marcus the parts that looked least horrifying, laying them at his feet like offerings. Marcus learned to butcher the alien meat, to cook it over his small fire, and discovered that most of it tasted like chicken. If chicken had been mixed with metal and regret, it wasn't good, but it was protein, and he needed protein to survive. But Shard brought him more than just food. One morning, the Vralith returned with its mouth carefully closed around something, moving slowly so as not to damage whatever it carried. When it dropped the bundle at Marcus's feet, he found himself staring at a collection of what looked like fruits, the same kind he had seen on the crystal trees, but had been too afraid to try. For me? Marcus asked. Shard made its happy wind chime sound and nudged the fruit toward him. Marcus took a small bite, ready to spit it out if it tasted wrong. But the flavor was sweet and slightly tangy, and his scanner confirmed it was safe for human consumption. Somehow Shard knew what he could eat, could distinguish between the plants that would feed him and the ones that would kill him. You're a lot smarter than anyone gives you credit for, aren't you? Marcus said while Shard settled down next to him, the creature's body radiating warmth in the cool alien morning. The database had called the Vralith mindless killers. But Marcus saw intelligence in Shard's eyes, saw problem-solving skills and social awareness that suggested something far more complex than a simple predator. On his 10th day on ZK-447, Marcus found the research station. It was hidden in a dense part of the jungle, almost completely overgrown with the purple vegetation. But Shard had led him there. The creature seemed to know the area well, and Marcus was beginning to trust its judgment about where to go and what to avoid. The station was old, probably abandoned for decades. But the Galactic Council's building standards meant bad. Parts of it were still intact. Marcus forced open a door that protested with the shriek of rusted metal, and stepped inside. What he found changed everything. The main research room was a mess of overturned equipment and scattered papers. Clear signs of a hasty evacuation, but one terminal still had power from its emergency batteries. Marcus activated it with shaking hands. The logs were incomplete, corrupted by time and damage, but what remained painted a picture very different from the official reports Dr. Kavith Shen, lead xenobiologist, had written. Day 43. We've made a terrible mistake. The Ralith aren't solitary ambush predators as we initially theorized. They're social pack hunters with complex family structures. Our arrival in force with vehicles and weapons triggered their territorial defense response. We never saw them as they truly are because we only ever met them in combat. Another entry. This one from just days before the station was abandoned. The juvenile we observed today brought food to what we believe was an injured pack member. Showed clear signs of empathy and care. If we could approach them differently, without weapons in small numbers, but the council has ordered full evacuation after the attack that killed Jenkins and Morita. They're classifying this world as permanent quarantine. Marcus read through the logs 3 times, his mind racing. Every expedition to ZK-447 had come the same way, large teams, heavily armed, in loud vehicles that probably seemed like invasions to the Ralith. Of course, the creatures had attacked. Of course, they had killed everyone they encountered, because everyone they encountered had been a threat, but a single unarmed human who posed no danger, who helped an injured juvenile. That got a different response entirely. They were wrong, Marcus said to Shard, who had followed him into the station and was nosing around the equipment with what looked like curiosity. Everyone was wrong about your people. He spent hours in the research station, salvaging what equipment still worked. And that's when he found it a long-range transmitter that had survived because it was shielded in a separate building. It took Marcus 3 days to get the transmitter working. 3 days of scavenging parts from his crashed ship and the station. 3 days of working while Shard watched with patient interest. The Ralith seemed to understand that this was important, even if it didn't know why. When the transmitter finally powered up and connected to the council relay network, Marcus almost cried with relief. He recorded his message carefully. This is Sergeant Marcus Webb, Colonial Marines. To any Galactic Council vessel receiving this transmission, I am alive on Quarantine World ZK-447, and I need extraction, but this is critical. Any rescue mission must come unarmed and with minimal personnel. I repeat, unarmed and minimal personnel. The Ralith are not what we think they are, and coming in force will only trigger an attack. He sent the message on repeat and waited. The response came 6 hours later, and it made his heart sink. Sergeant Webb, this is Galactic Council Command. We are gratified to hear you survived, but we cannot comply with your request. Standard extraction protocol for quarantine worlds requires full tactical team with heavy weapons support. AEs 48 hours. Prepare for extraction and avoid all contact with native apex predators. No. Marcus grabbed the transmitter and sent another message. You don't understand. Coming in heavy will get everyone killed. The Ralith only attack when they feel threatened. I'm currently living alongside one. They're intelligent and social, and we've had it all wrong. The response was worse than before. Sergeant Webb, you may be experiencing psychological stress from your ordeal. Remain at your location and await extraction. Any claimed contact with Ralith is likely hallucination or misidentification. Standard protocols will be followed. Marcus wanted to throw the transmitter across the room, but he restrained himself. Breaking their only link to rescue wouldn't help anything. Shard, he said to the Ralith, who perked up at the name Marcus had been using. "We have a problem. Some well-meaning idiots are about to come here with guns and armor, and they're going to meet your whole family, and when your family sees a threat, people are going to die." Shard made a questioning wind chime sound. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "I don't know how to fix it either." He had 48 hours to figure out how to prevent a massacre. 48 hours to somehow convince a heavily armed extraction team not to shoot first and ask questions later. 48 hours to prove that everything the galaxy thought it knew about the Ralph was wrong. Marcus sat down next to Shard, and the creature immediately pressed against him, offering comfort the way it had learned to do. "We're going to need a plan," Marcus told his unlikely friend. "And it's probably going to be a really stupid plan." Shard made its contentment sound. Trusting him completely, Marcus just hoped that trust wasn't going to get them both killed. The extraction ship came down like a meteor, all thunder and fire and enough engine noise to wake anything within 10 kilometers. Marcus watched from his position at the edge of the clearing and felt his stomach drop, because this was exactly what he had warned them not to do. 20 soldiers in full combat armor deployed from the ship in a textbook tactical formation, weapons raised and scanning for threats. Their leader, a Xanthari officer whose name tag read Commander Thexiolar, moved with the confidence of someone who had run dozens of these missions and expected this one to go exactly the same way Marcus had maybe 2 minutes before. Shard's pack responded to the invasion. "Stand down," Marcus shouted while walking toward them, with his hands clearly visible and empty. "Lower your weapons right now." Thexiolar's scaled face turned toward him, all 4 of the Xanthari's eyes narrowing. "Sergeant Webb, I presume?" "Step away from the tree line and move to the extraction point. We're reading multiple large biosignatures converging on this location." "I know," Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice calm, even as panic clawed at his throat. "Those are Ralith, and they're not attacking. They're responding to a perceived threat. If you lower your weapons, they'll stand down." "Negative," Thexiolar said flatly. "Standard protocol is non-negotiable. All soldiers maintain combat readiness, Sergeant." "That's an order." The wind chime sound echoed through the jungle, and every soldier snapped their weapons toward the source. Marcus saw the fear in their body language and knew this was about to go very bad, very fast. "Please," Marcus said, putting every bit of desperation he felt into the word. "Please listen to me." Shard emerged from the tree line first, moving with careful deliberation, and Marcus heard multiple soldiers suck in sharp breaths at the sight of the massive creature. But Shard wasn't attacking, wasn't even approaching the soldiers, just moving to stand next to Marcus. "By the council," one soldier breathed. "It's right there. Hold fire," Thexiolar commanded. But the officer's hand was tight on their own weapon. "Sergeant Webb, step away from the hostile." "It's not hostile," Marcus said while reaching out to rest his hand on Shard's crystalline shoulder. "Its name is Shard, and it's been keeping me alive for 2 weeks. More Ralith emerged from the jungle. 3, 5, 8, a dozen, all adults, all massive, all moving to form a loose circle around the clearing with Marcus and Shard at the center. It should have looked like a hunting formation, but Marcus could read their body language now. Could see that they were confused and wary, but not aggressive. "Not yet. We have multiple hostiles surrounding our position," one soldier reported, voice tight with controlled fear. "Requesting permission to engage." "Negative," Thexiolar said. But the commander's scales were flushing the blue-gray color that meant stress in Xanthari. "Not unless they attack first, Sergeant Webb. I am ordering you one final time to move away from that creature." Marcus looked at the soldiers, at Shard, at the pack of Ralith who were watching this confrontation with intelligent eyes. He thought about the research logs, about everything he had learned, about the choice he was about to make. "No," he said simply, "that's insubordination. Court-martial me later." Marcus interrupted. Right now, you need to understand what's happening here. The Vralith aren't mindless killers. They're pack hunters with social structures and intelligence. Every expedition to this world failed because they came in force. Like you just did, the Vralith saw invaders and defended their territory, but a single unarmed human? That's not a threat to them. That's something they can understand and communicate with. That's impossible. The Xeoler said, our xenobiologists classified them as, your xenobiologists were wrong. Marcus shouted, and immediately regretted it because Shard tensed beside him and the adult Vralith shifted in response. They were wrong because they never got close enough to really observe. They only ever saw these creatures in combat. The largest Vralith, a massive specimen with crystalline armor that looked almost metallic in the alien sunlight, took a step forward. Every weapon immediately tracked to it. Don't shoot, Marcus said urgently. Please don't shoot. The Alpha Vralith, because Marcus was certain that's what it was, made a deep resonating sound that vibrated in his chest. Not threatening but questioning, like it was asking what these strangers were doing in its territory. Shard responded with its own wind chime sound, softer and higher pitched, and Marcus caught what might have been meaning in the exchange Shard was explaining. He realized with sudden certainty, telling the Alpha that Marcus was pack, that he belonged here. Fascinating as this is, the Xeoler said, and Marcus heard the officer's patience fraying. We have our orders, all personnel prepare for tactical extraction. That's when everything went wrong. One of the soldiers, a young Pelthian who looked barely out of training, was backing toward the ship when he stepped on a piece of debris from Marcus's crash. The metal shrieked and the soldier stumbled. His weapon discharged, sending a bolt of energy that grazed Shard's flank. The Vralith roared, a sound like shattering glass mixed with thunder, and the clearing exploded into chaos. The pack surged forward as one, while soldiers shouted and raised weapons while the Xeoler screamed orders that nobody could hear over the noise. Marcus saw the future in crystal clarity. Everyone would die here. Human and Xantharian, Pelthian and Vralith, all because of fear and misunderstanding and one accidental shot. He didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. Marcus threw himself in front of Shard with his arms spread wide, putting his body between the wounded Vralith and 20 aimed weapons, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Stop!" And somehow, impossibly, everything stopped. The soldiers held fire because their target was behind a human, and nobody wanted to be the one who shot a colonial marine. The Vralith froze because Shard had made an urgent sound that halted them mid-charge, and for one perfect moment, the clearing was absolutely silent except for heavy breathing and the wind through crystal trees. Marcus's heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. But he forced himself to stay calm, to move slowly, to project confidence he didn't feel. He turned to face Shard, the creature who was bleeding from a new wound and had every reason to be terrified and angry. And he reached up with both hands to gently touch the sides of Shard's crystalline face. "It's okay," Marcus whispered. "Nobody meant to hurt you. I won't let them hurt you." Shard made a small, pained sound but leaned into his touch. The Vralith's eyes, which Marcus had learned to read over the past 2 weeks, showed trust despite the fear. Marcus had learned something else during his time with Shard, gesture the Vralith used between pack members, touching their foreheads together in a sign of absolute trust and acceptance. He took a breath, sent up a prayer to whatever gods might be listening, and slowly lowered his head until his forehead pressed against Shard's crystalline brow. The gesture was universal. Every soldier and every Vralith understood what they were witnessing. By the void, someone whispered. Marcus held the position for a long moment, then slowly straightened and turned to face the Alpha Vralith, the massive creature that could kill him with one swipe of its claws. that had every reason to attack the armed soldiers who had invaded its territory and wounded one of its pack. This was the moment. This was where he would either prove his first theory or die trying. The clearing fell silent again as Marcus walked forward on legs that wanted to shake. As he approached the Alpha with empty hands and open body language and every ounce of calm he could project, the Alpha watched him come, massive and still, crystalline armor glinting in the light. Marcus could see the intelligence in those eyes, could see the creature thinking and evaluating and deciding. "I know you understand more than anyone thinks," Marcus said softly, knowing tone mattered more than words. "I know you're not what they say you are, and I'm asking you to trust me the way Shard trusted me." He stopped just within reach of the Alpha's claws and very slowly, very carefully, raised his hands toward the creature's face. The Alpha could have killed him, should have killed him by all conventional wisdom, but instead the massive Ralith lowered its head until Marcus's hands rested on either side of its crystalline face. The Alpha's eyes met his own, and Marcus saw recognition there, saw understanding, saw the choice being made. Then the Alpha Ralith did exactly what Marcus had hoped for. It leaned forward and pressed its forehead against Marcus's, mirroring the gesture of trust and pack acceptance behind him. Marcus heard weapons lowering and shock heard Dexazolor's sharp intake of breath heard someone activating a recording device to capture this impossible moment. When the Alpha finally pulled back, it made a deep harmonic sound, and the other Vrelith relaxed their aggressive postures. The crisis was over. At least for now. Marcus turned to face the extraction team, his legs finally giving in to the shaking they wanted to do, and found every single soldier staring at him like he was something they couldn't quite believe. "You see?" Marcus said, and his voice came out hoarse. "They're not monsters. They're people. They just speak a different language than we do." Dexiolar stood very still for a long moment, then slowly holstered their weapon. The other soldiers followed suit, muscle memory responding to their commander's lead. "This footage," the Zentari said quietly, "is going to change everything we thought we knew about quarantine worlds." The footage reached the Galactic Council headquarters within 6 hours, and by hour 12, it had spread across every civilized system in known space. A human, one of the strange Deathworlders that the galaxy still wasn't quite sure what to do with, pressing his forehead against the most dangerous apex predator in the cataloged universe. While both species stood down from violence, the council chambers erupted into debate that lasted for 3 days straight. Marcus watched the proceedings via live feed from the research station, which had become an impromptu base camp, while Vexiola tried to figure out what to do with a situation that had no precedent in council protocol. Shard lay next to him, wound treated and healing, while other Vralith moved in and out of the clearing with increasing comfort around the soldiers who had stopped aiming weapons at them. "They're calling you the Death World Whisperer on the feeds," Vexiola said, all 4 eyes fixed on their datapad. "There are xenobiologists demanding to know how this is possible. Some are calling the footage fake." "It's not fake," Marcus said tiredly. He had been awake for most of the past 3 days answering questions via subspace com. "It's just that nobody ever tried approaching them the right way before." A counselor from the Zentari delegation appeared on screen, scales flushed with agitation. "Sergeant Webb, you must understand how unprecedented this is. The Vralith have a 100% fatality rate against every expedition ever sent to ZK-447, because every expedition came as an invader." Marcus repeated for what felt like the 1,000th time. "Large teams, weapons, vehicles. Everything screaming threat, in a language the Vralith understand perfectly. Of course, they defended their territory. But you," another counselor, this one a Pelthian, whose translator gave their voice a musical quality, "you survived by doing what exactly?" Marcus took a breath and tried to organize his thoughts into something that wouldn't sound completely insane. Humans evolved on Earth alongside apex predators, big cats, bears, wolves, creatures that could absolutely kill us, but that we learned to coexist with. We learned to read their body language, to understand their social structures, to communicate in ways that didn't require words. And this translates to alien predators how? The Pelthian Council oppressed, because fear and aggression and social bonding are universal. Marcus said while reaching out to scratch behind Shard's audio receptors, making the Vralith produce its contentment sound. Predators across the galaxy probably share more in common than we think. They hunt, they protect their territory. They form social groups humans spent hundreds of thousands of years learning to navigate those behaviors with Earth's predators. The Axiolar spoke up from where the commander had been listening. If I may, counselors, I witnessed the interaction firsthand, and I can confirm that Sergeant Webb displayed no weapons, no aggressive postures, and approached the Vralith Alpha with body language that any species would recognize as non-threatening. The creatures responded in kind. This is concerning, a new voice said. And Marcus recognized Councilor Vrenthur, a conservative member who had been vocal about restricting human expansion. Humans are already disconcerting to many species. You evolved on a high-gravity world. You consume substances that are toxic to most of us. You bond with species that eat sapient creatures as pets. We prefer the term domestication to pets. Marcus muttered, and now we discover you can form alliances with apex predators that kill trained soldiers? Vrenthur continued, this makes humanity more dangerous. Not less. Marcus felt anger flash through him, but forced it down. Losing his temper wouldn't help. Or, it makes us useful. How many worlds has the Council cataloged and then quarantined because of dangerous fauna? How many resources are locked away because we can't figure out how to coexist with the native predators? That caused a stir among the counselors, and Marcus pressed his advantage. ZK-447 has mineral deposits that are valuable. Rare earth elements that could benefit dozens of systems, but it's been locked away for 80 years because the Vralith kill anyone who tries to land here, except they don't. Kill humans who approach them correctly. You're proposing what exactly? The Pelthian counselor asked Marcus, had been thinking about this constantly since the extraction team arrived. Had been refining his proposal in his head during every break in the questioning. Let me stay here with a small research team, all human volunteers who understand the risks. We establish a permanent outpost and learn to coexist with the Vralith, if it works. ZK-447 becomes accessible for resource extraction and study, if it doesn't work. You've only lost a few humans who knew what they were signing up for. The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel through the subspace connection. Absolutely not. Vrenthur said flatly. The risk is too great. The risk of what? Marcus challenged. That humans might succeed? That we might prove you can coexist with predators instead of just avoiding them or exterminating them? The risk, Vrenthur said coldly, is that you'll create a precedent that humans will start claiming all our quarantine worlds, forming bonds with creatures that should remain isolated, building an empire on the backs of apex predators that see you as pack rather than prey. Marcus stared at the screen, genuinely shocked. You're not afraid of the Vralith, you're afraid of us. I did not say that. You didn't have to, Marcus said, and he heard the bitterness in his own voice. Humans are already scary enough without giving them predator allies, is that it? Better to keep us contained. Keep us away from anything that might make us more formidable. Sergeant Webb, the Zenthari counselor, said firmly. That is not the concern being raised. Then what is the concern? Marcus demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like an opportunity to turn a locked-away death world into a productive research station and eventually a colony. The Vralith aren't going anywhere, And killing them all would be genocide. So what's the alternative? Leave this world quarantined forever? Waste everything it could offer because we're too afraid to try a different approach? Shard made a questioning sound and pressed closer to Marcus. Sensing his agitation, several of the counselors visibly flinched at the sight of the massive predator, seeking comfort from a human. You see? Renther said, pointing at the screen. They should not be that comfortable with each other. It's unnatural. It's evolution, Marcus countered. Humans and wolves formed partnerships maybe 40,000 years ago. Those wolves became dogs, and that partnership changed both our species. The galaxy is full of symbiotic relationships between different species. Why is this one so different? Because wolves are not apex predators capable of killing armed soldiers, Renther said. They were when we first partnered with them, Marcus shot back. Everything seems impossible until someone does it. The debate raged for hours more, with various counselors weighing in from across the galaxy. Some saw opportunity, others saw threat. Most saw something they didn't understand, and that made them nervous finally. The head of the council, an ancient Keltharian whose name Marcus couldn't pronounce, called for a vote. The proposal is as follows. Sergeant Marcus Webb and a team of human volunteers will establish a research outpost on designation ZK-447 for a trial period of 5 years. They will study the Vralith, attempt to establish communication protocols, and assess whether coexistence is truly possible at the end of 5 years. The Council will review their findings and determine whether to lift the quarantine status. All in favor? Marcus held his breath. The vote was close. Far closer than he would have liked. There were counselors who saw potential and counselors who saw danger and counselors who just wanted the whole situation to go away. But when the count finished, the proposal had passed by a slim margin. Motion approved, the Keltharian announced. ZK-447 will undergo trial habitation under human oversight. Sergeant Webb, you are hereby assigned as primary liaison between the Galactic Council and the Vralith population. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Thank you, counselors. I won't let you down. See that you don't, Renther said darkly. The galaxy will be watching, Sergeant, and if this experiment fails, it will set human expansion back decades. The transmission ended, and Marcus sat in silence for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. Fexler approached with what might have been respect in the Zenthri's posture. You took an enormous risk. If the Council had voted differently, you could have been court-martialed for insubordination. If the Council had voted differently, this world would have stayed quarantined, and the Vralith would have been misunderstood forever, Marcus said while running his hand over Shard's crystalline armor. Some risks are worth taking. I volunteered, Dexioler said abruptly. Marcus blinked. What? For your research team, the commander clarified. I volunteered to stay and observe. The Council approved. Someone needs to file official reports, and I find myself curious about what else we may have gotten wrong about species we dismissed as simple predators. Marcus smiled. Tired but genuine. Welcome to the team, Commander. Over the next few weeks, more volunteers arrived, xenobiologists who wanted to study the Vralith up close, linguists hoping to decode their wind chime language, engineers to build a proper research station, and soldiers who were willing to live among apex predators if it meant breaking new ground. 5 years changed everything. Marcus stood on the observation deck of what was now called New Sanctuary Station and watched the sunset paint the crystal trees in colors that still took his breath away even after all this time below him. 200 humans lived and worked alongside 3 separate Vralith packs in a harmony that the galaxy had declared impossible. Shard appeared at his side, moving with the silent grace of a full-grown apex predator, no longer the injured juvenile who had pressed against his chest. That first day, but a pack leader in their own right. The Vralith touched their forehead to Marcus's in the gesture that had become their private greeting. "Hey, old friend," Marcus said softly, scratching the spot behind Shard's audio receptors that still made the creature produce that contented wind chime sound the past 5 years had been harder than Marcus had ever admitted publicly. There had been setbacks and injuries and moments when the whole experiment nearly fell apart. A human researcher had approached a Vralith too aggressively and gotten slashed across the arm. A juvenile Vralith had panicked during a thunderstorm and damaged equipment. There had been cultural misunderstandings that seemed insurmountable, but they had persisted. Learned. A DAPT EDDR Sarah Chen, the chief linguist, emerged from the research lab with an expression of barely contained excitement. She had been working on the Vralith communication project since arriving 3 years ago, and Marcus knew that look meant something significant. "We cracked it," Sarah said without preamble. "The resonance frequencies, they're not just emotional expression. They're actual language, complex, grammatical, capable of abstract thought." Marcus. "The Vralith have language." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. "You sure?" "Watch." Sarah activated her datapad and played a recording. It showed a Vralith from the northern pack making a series of wind chime sounds while Sarah's translation program displayed text beneath. "The small ones require teaching in the ways of hunting before the cold season arrives." "The small ones," Marcus breathed. "They're talking about their cubs." "About education. We've identified over 3,000 distinct phonemes so far," Sarah continued, her words tumbling over themselves in excitement. "They have words for family, for teaching, for concepts like tomorrow and memory." "Marcus, they're not pre-sapient. They're already sapient. They're people." Shard made a complex series of sounds and Sarah's program translated. "The Skywatcher understands our words now. This brings joy." Marcus looked at his friend with new eyes. "You've been talking to us this whole time, and we just couldn't hear you." Shard's response came through the translator. "The soft speaker hears with more than ears. This is known from the beginning." The implications hit Marcus like a physical force. They hadn't just established contact with intelligent predators. They had discovered an entirely new sapient species and spent 80 years keeping them in quarantine because nobody had bothered to learn their language. "The Council needs to know about this immediately," Marcus said, already moving toward the communication center. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours, and the chamber was packed with representatives from every major species. Marcus stood before them with Sarah at his side, and Shard waiting just outside the chamber, visible through the transparent walls. "Counselors," Marcus began, 5 years ago you approved a trial program to study the Vralith and assess whether coexistence was possible today. I'm here to tell you that we asked the wrong question. We shouldn't have been asking if we can coexist with predators. We should have been asking when we would recognize them as equals. He activated the holographic display and played recordings of Vralith communication. The translation scrolling beneath conversations about hunting strategies, about teaching cubs, about the strange soft-skinned visitors who had come to live among them. The Vralith possess complex language, social structures, educational systems, and abstract thought, Sarah added. By every metric we use to define sapience, they qualify. They're not fauna. Counselors, they're people. The chamber erupted into Cal of Renther, who had opposed the project from the beginning, stood with scales flushed dark. This is worse than I feared. You've not just befriended apex predators. You've discovered a sapient warrior species and taught them to trust humans. I taught them that not everyone who comes to their world wants to kill them, Marcus shot back. And they taught me that intelligence and predatory ability aren't mutually exclusive. A Pelthian counselor raised a trembling hand. If the Vralith are sapient, then the quarantine designation was a mistake, Marcus finished. Based on incomplete data and a failure to communicate, we treated first contact like a military operation and got a military response. First contact protocols, another counselor began, don't apply when you've already killed the people you're trying to contact. Marcus said bluntly, 80 years. Counselors, for 80 years, we kept an entire sapient species locked away on their homeworld because we were too afraid to try talking to them. The ancient Keltharian who led the council spoke, their voice carrying across the suddenly quiet chamber. What are you proposing, Sergeant Webb? Marcus had prepared for this moment for months. Full diplomatic recognition for the Vralith as a sapient species, a formal apology from the Council for the quarantine designation, and most importantly, the Vralith's choice about their own future. Let them decide if they want contact with the wider galaxy, if they want trade, if they want to remain isolated. Give them the agency that every sapient species deserves. And if they choose contact? Renther challenged. If they decide to leave their world and spread across the galaxy as humans have done, then they have that right, Marcus said firmly. Just like every other species in this chamber. The vote that followed was not close this time, faced with undeniable evidence of Vralith sapience. The council had no choice but to grant them recognition. The quarantine status was lifted and replaced with protected world designation until the Vralith could be properly consulted about their preferences. Marcus walked out of the council chambers knowing that everything had changed again. The phenomenon that scientists were calling the human effect spread across the galaxy over the following years. Planets that had been deemed too dangerous due to apex predators were being reassessed. Humans were being called in as consultants and mediators. Their unique ability to relate to predators as potential allies rather than inevitable threats, opening worlds that had been closed for centuries. It wasn't always successful. Some predators remained genuinely hostile. Some worlds were too dangerous, even for humans, but the paradigm had shifted back on New Sanctuary. Marcus watched as human children played alongside Vralith cubs in a supervised contact program that had taken 3 years to develop. The kids were teaching the cubs human games, while the cubs taught the kids how to read wind currents for hunting. It was messy and chaotic, and occasionally someone got accidentally scratched or knocked over. But it worked. This still terrifies me, Dexioler said, appearing at Marcus's side. The Zenthari commander had stayed for the full 5 years and had become Marcus's closest friend among the research team. Watching apex predators play with children as if it's the most natural thing in the galaxy. It is natural, Marcus said. Watching a human girl laugh as a Vralith cub gently headbutted her in a request for scratches. Predators have social bonds. They play. They teach. We just had to stop seeing them as monsters long enough to notice. The other species are worried, Dexioler admitted quietly. Humanity was already concerning your death world origin, your pack bonding with dangerous animals, your disturbing tendency to eat foods that would kill most of us. But now you're forming alliances with apex predators, teaching them language, integrating them into your society, and that scares people, Marcus finished. It terrifies them, Dexioler corrected, because it changes the balance. Humans were the aggressive deathworlders that everyone watched nervously. But humans with predator allies? Humans who can walk onto a quarantine world and walk out with a new species as friends. That makes you the most formidable species in known space. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do we scare you?" Dexioler's scales flushed through several colors before settling on a pattern Marcus had learned to read as thoughtfulness. "You did. Initially, I thought you were reckless, dangerous, too willing to take insane risks. But I've spent 5 years watching you work with the Vralith, and I understand now you're not reckless. You're optimistic. You see potential allies where we see threats. You see family where we see monsters. And does that still scare you? Yes, Dexioler said honestly. But it also gives me hope, because if humans can bridge the gap between species as different as yourselves and the Vrolith, perhaps you can help bridge gaps between species that have been in conflict for centuries. Perhaps your strange Death World perspective is exactly what the galaxy needs. Marcus smiled. That's almost a compliment, Commander. Don't let it go to your head, Dexioler said. But there was warmth in their voice. You're still the human who put himself between an injured predator and 20 guns. And that's still the day I'm most proud of. Marcus said, quietly. Shard approached with several other adult Vrolith. And Marcus noticed they were positioning themselves in a formal configuration he had learned indicated important communication. Sarah arrived.